So I really must say that this is absolutely absurd. And yet I am not surprised by the events that continue to unfold that will further put additional strain on Americans as U.S. resources continue to be depleted while having the possibility of further driving up costs associated with all goods and services, and most importantly, the price of food and transportation, literally by the minute. Now, I'm preparing for higher prices and even more inflation starting early next year. My primary concern will be prepping for the warning signs that I am continuing to see more and more now that are placing me and my family on high alert for the increased hardship and struggle of financial survival. And here is a prime example why. Now, Reuters released this just a little while ago, and it said Europe rushes to fill up on Russian diesel before ban begins. Okay, guys, get this. The article says the European traders are rushing to fill tanks in the region with Russian diesel before an EU ban begins in February, as alternative sources remain limited. The European Union will ban Russian oil product imports on which it relies heavily for its diesel by February 5th. That will follow a ban on Russian crude taking effect in December. So Russian diesel loadings destined for Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Antwerp storage region rose to 215,000 barrels per day from November 1 to November 12, which is up 126% from October, according to Pamela Munger, senior market analyst at energy analytics firm Vortexa. So with few immediate cost-effective alternatives, diesel from Russia has made up 44% of Europe's total imports of the road fuel so far this month when compared to 39% last month. And although Europe's reliance on Russian fuel has fallen from more than 50% before Moscow's February invasion of Ukraine, Russia is still the continent's largest diesel supplier. Folks, this war has to come to an end before it starts killing us all, financially straining the world and Americans here at home that are feeling the pain and the fallout. We'll get more on that later. So pay close attention to this because this is where the fight comes to our doorsteps. Eugene Lindell, refining and products market analyst at FGE, said the EU will have to secure around 500 to 600,000 barrels a day of diesel to replace the Russian volumes. And so the replacements will come from, you guessed it, the U.S., as well as East Suez, primarily the Middle East and India. Yes, folks, you heard that right. The U.S. will be supplying even more diesel to the region as the EU cuts off supply from Russia. And this should be extremely alarming to folks who are aware of the current diesel refinery and diesel shortage crisis that we already face here in America, primarily on the East Coast, with energy company Mansfield Energy issuing warnings of supply chain bottlenecks and reduced volume. And shipping more of our already low capacity to Europe would only mean added stress and strain on supply here in the U.S., increasing the weight of demand and thus driving up prices for the limited and extremely precious resource. Not good, folks. Perhaps this is a possible driving force behind one of the latest and maybe most insane stories I've come across today. So get this. California looks to ban diesel trucks at ports by 2035. This, according to the Wall Street Journal and also Fox Business reports, diesel price increase affecting trucking industry. Look, guys, check this out. So let me tell you about the diesel fuel price increase first, okay? So nationwide, truckers and trucking companies have been dealing with the rising prices of diesel since this summer, and they say that they are seeing no sign of pricing coming down. Chris Shelton is a driver for Lightning Logistics, and he says his company added an extra charge for his fuel and lowered his expenses, and it is the only thing keeping food on his family's table. Chris said, it makes it harder and harder to budget yourself out each week. So Adam Wright, who owns Lightning Logistics, and he says that he's doing what he can to keep his drivers afloat. While diesel hits record premium over gas and oil, Adam said, we had to go to our customers and we had to say, look, this is a unique environment. Fuel is through the roof now, so we had to go to our customers and put a fuel surcharge in place. And drivers like Chris Shelton say this fuel surcharge literally saved his finances. Now, Chris said that without a fuel surcharge, none of us would be able to operate. And I'm sure he isn't the only one in this situation. So according to AAA, 1 year ago, a gallon of diesel fuel was $3.65 on average. And now today it is up to $5.33. So look, check this out. Chris says that the high prices coupled with a trucker shortage are hurting the whole industry, and the oil market faces considerable uncertainties. And this is according to warnings from OPEC. Chris said that mid and post-pandemic, when trucking was at such an influx, a lot of his fellow drivers left to get what they would call real jobs or to go out on their own and be independent. And Adam Wright also pointed to the shortage of drivers as affecting the trucking industry as well. He said there's a shortage of truckers and there's a lot of stuff that needs to move. So it's a supply-demand issue. Now, they say that the supply and demand issue could become a supply chain issue. Meanwhile, the U.S. Energy Information Agency, the EIA, which monitors diesel inventory, says that October saw the lowest fuel supply since 2008. U.S. drillers add oil and gas rigs for second week in a row, and this is according to Baker Hughes. And Chris Shelton said that if diesel prices continue to rise and companies cannot get more drivers on the road, that would ultimately result in higher prices at stores. So he said it starts with me as a fuel surcharge just to pick something up and take it somewhere. Well, then the person I'm taking it to has to raise their price to sell it, and the person they're taking it to, because I don't take it to a grocery store, I got to take it to a distributor. Everybody's got to go up a little bit. And of course, then it goes back around to me when I go somewhere to buy something myself. So this is what I've been warning you folks about. I warned everybody about this for months, and I hope it's becoming more clear. Now, I'm continuing to prepare for this, and I hope you and your family are too. All right, so now let's get back to this crazy story out of California. So reports say that an ambitious California plan to require trucking fleets in the state to switch from diesel to electric power faces a potential backup at charging stations. And the California Air Resources Board is proposing phasing out older big rigs operating in the busy corridors, shuttling shipping containers between ports, rail yards, and warehouses, and require that all new vehicles be powered by clean fuels starting in 2024. So, for 2025, the state would bar trucks powered by internal combustion engines that have more than 800,000 miles on them. While truckers say the state's lack of charging stations for big rigs is a major obstacle to switching to electric, and not only the lack of charging stations, but the cost associated with truck drivers having to acquire new, extremely expensive EV big rigs while their then obsolete ICE, Kenworths, Western Stars, and Volvos would be literally worthless. Oh, and not to mention, Cali can't even maintain an electrical grid as it is now to keep the lights on for their residents, let alone increase the grid's demand from all the Teslas and Rivians and Lucids and Hummer EVs that are driving around. You do recall this past summer when California requested residents to stop using electricity when possible because their system couldn't handle it and the intense summer heat. And this is after weighing decisions of shutting down a perfectly functioning power plant. I mean, what are these folks really thinking or smoking out there? Now, perhaps Biden has actually done something worthy of my approval after reading a Los Angeles Times article with a recent headline that stated, Biden gives PG&E $1 billion to keep the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant open. So the report says that the case for nuclear power as a climate solution got a big boost when the Biden administration announced it's giving Pacific Gas and Electric Company a $1.1 billion grant to help the company keep operating California's last nuclear plant. The Diablo Canyon plant is currently scheduled to shut down in 2 phases, with the first reactor going offline in 2024 and the second in 2025. But Governor Gavin Newsom has led a spirited push to keep the reactors humming another 5 years, saying they're badly needed to help the Golden State grapple with power shortages and worsening heat waves. So the federal money doesn't guarantee Diablo Canyon will stay open longer, but it's looking increasingly likely California will rely on the plant for at least a few additional years. Despite decades of anti-nuclear activism and continued public concerns about what would happen if an earthquake erupts along one of the seismic fault lines near the facility. PG&E Chief Executive Patty Pope noted that Diablo Canyon supplied more than 8% of California's electricity last year and 17% of the state's climate friendly, carbon free electricity. She also said the plant has a strong safety record as well. And Pope said that in an interview, it is a good choice for the state of California and for, frankly, the planet that a well performing plant like Diablo Canyon could continue to serve. So, the $1.1 billion in federal money comes from the infrastructure law passed by Congress and signed by President Biden last year. And it should allow PG&E to pay back most of the $1.4 billion loan for Diablo that state lawmakers approved at Newsom's urging. Now, that state money is slated to help PG&E cover the costs of relicensing at the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as well as maintenance, fuel purchases, and additional on-site storage for radioactive waste needed to keep the plant running past 2025. The final terms of the federal grant still need to be negotiated with PG&E, and officials at the U.S. Department of Energy say the money will be distributed over 4 years from 2023 through 2026. It's designed to cover PG&E's projected losses from keeping Diablo Canyon open longer. So if the company's operating costs come in lower than expected or its power sales revenues are higher than expected, it won't get quite as much federal money. And so if the plant fails to secure its federal licensing renewal or any of the state permits it needs to keep operating, the funding spigot will be shut off. So the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, said in a written statement, "This is a critical step towards ensuring that our domestic nuclear fleet will continue providing reliable and affordable power to Americans as the nation's largest source of clean electricity. And consequently, the future of nuclear power has become one of America's most contentious energy debates as the climate crisis worsens. Past nuclear disasters at Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island stoked deep public fears about meltdowns and radioactive fallout, with the 2011 crisis at Japan's Fukushima plant hardening those sentiments for many. But worsening wildfires, heat waves, droughts, and other climate extremes linked to the burning of fossil fuels and growing awareness that nuclear plants currently produce half the nation's carbon-free electricity have led to some to reevaluate the merits of facilities like Diablo. And a recent UC Berkeley poll, co-sponsored by The Times, found that 44% of California voters support building more nuclear reactors in the state, with 37% opposed and 19% undecided. Now, this is a significant change from the sentiment in the 1980s and 1990s. The poll also found that 39% of voters oppose shutting down Diablo Canyon, 33% support closure, and 28% are unsure. Now, Pope said, "I'm just happy that the tides have shifted." So the governor capitalized on those shifting tides, cajoling state lawmakers into approving a $1.4 billion loan designed to keep Diablo running through 2030. And the vote came during an intense heat wave, which saw state officials beg Californians to use less power during the hot evening hours, when solar panels and wind turbines stopped generating for a record 10 days in a row. The state managed to avoid rolling blackouts, but it was less lucky 2 years earlier when a few 100,000 homes and businesses lost power briefly over 2 evenings during a brutal heat wave. So there was another close call in 2021 when a wildfire temporarily knocked out several key power lines that bring hydropower from the Pacific Northwest to California. So supporters say that the continuing operation of Diablo Canyon is crucial for keeping the lights on while fighting climate change. California Governor Gavin Newsom told the LA Times that some would say it's the righteous and right climate decision. So the U.S. had 93 operating nuclear reactors last year, which generated nearly 1/5 of the nation's electricity. Those plants could go a long way towards meeting President Biden's goal of 100% climate-friendly electricity by 2035. But 13 reactors have shut down since 2013, often due to competition from lower-cost energy sources such as solar, wind, and natural gas. In some cases, nuclear closures have led to more business for gas-fired power plants, which cause climate pollution to rise. Atomic energy supporters say it's crucial to support power plants that can generate clean electricity around the clock. Hence, the $6 billion set aside by Congress to rescue economically distressed facilities such as Diablo Canyon. And PG&E was the only company to receive nuclear rescue dollars from the White House. At least one company was denied funding, but there is still a chance that more money could flow to the ailing nuclear plants during a second round of funding planned by the Department of Energy. However, some critics say throwing money at Diablo and other dying nuclear plants is foolish, as Newsom lobbied the legislature to approve the $1.4 billion loan to save Diablo. Ralph Kavanaugh, a top official at the nonprofit Natural Resources Defense Council and a key architect of the 2016 deal to shut down a nuclear plant, he slammed the governor for supporting what he described as sweeping expectations to bedrock environmental laws and for failing to study whether there were better, cheaper ways for the state to keep electricity flowing reliably. While some experts and activists saying that rapid growth in lithium-ion batteries, for instance, played a key role in avoiding another round of rolling blackouts this summer, greater funding for batteries, energy efficiency, and demand response, paying people to use less electricity when the power grid is most stressed, could negate the need for continued reliance on nuclear power. Kavanaugh wrote, "When a state is looking for resources to ensure system reliability under extreme conditions that arise only during a small fraction of the total hours in a year, the last thing it wants is a power plant designed to operate continuously year-round, without any built-in capacity to shift much or all of its generation up or down in a matter of minutes." Other experts and activists disagree, and dozens of scientists and academics urged Newsom to keep the Diablo reactor spinning, as did former U.S. Energy Secretaries Stephen Chu and Ernest Moniz. So the potential for catastrophic meltdowns, however remote, isn't the only concerning animating anti-nuclear activists. The federal government has failed to build a permanent storage facility for spent nuclear fuel, meaning radioactive waste canisters are piling up at a power plant across the country, including the shuttered San Onofre plant in San Diego County. How do these risks and harms of nuclear power compare with fossil fuels? Well, according to Pope, the answer is clear. She said, given the significant impacts of climate change right here in California that we are currently experiencing with the extreme weather, of course we would want to be able to provide the cleanest energy that is most reliable for the people of California. So as I said, folks, this is a little bit absurd. It's alarming news to hear, but at the end of the day, this is what we're faced with. We are faced with a crippling effect of what diesel fuel and electricity and the combination of the two can have on our supply chains, our power availability, our ability to go to work, earn a living, allow our supply chain to operate and function properly at the cost of total collapse, total economic collapse, which will ultimately continue to drive up prices, increase inflation, and further suffocate the already struggling middle class, working class, poor Americans that are barely keeping up with expenses so far. So we do need solutions that can provide alternatives to, one, secure our fuel sources here, build up our reserves, and lower prices, and driving down the possibility of system failures and wildfires and other possible obstacles that we may face that will continuously put us at risk of higher prices, increased inflation, and further stress on the American family, their paychecks, their pocketbooks, their finances, and their savings, and their credit cards that are being maxed out to the limit left and right, with instances and occurrences that are happening in other countries and overseas around the world, and their conflicts that ultimately come back here that affect you and I every single day.